Well, it's 10:01. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We really appreciate you joining us today. I'm Michael Saliba-Lothman. I'm Director of Sales here at Holland Home. And with me are two colleagues and two gentlemen I count as friends as well. Adam Kinder, our Chief Financial Officer, and David Tiesenga, our Chief Strategy Officer. We have put this program together because we see a lot of people that we work with are mutual customers with financial planners, estate planning attorneys. And this idea of a continuing care community, life plan community, keeps coming up. And what options are there? How does it work? And so we've done these a few times. This is the first time we've done it on Zoom. And this will be recorded and put on our website later this week. So if you do want a copy of the presentation today, just let me know. I think my email is in your Zoom invitation. I'd be happy to send it out to you. But there's a presentation that Adam and David have put together, and then following that, we'll have a chance for question and answer. And so again, we're so glad. We know your time's valuable, and we're really glad you can join us today. So as you see their bio there on the screen, David is our Chief Strategy Officer. He's been here a couple days at Holland Home, over 35. Most recently was our Chief Financial Officer for 30 years. And in April, transitioned to his new role as a Chief Strategy Officer. He's a graduate of Grand Valley and has worked at all three campuses of Holland Home. And then Adam Kinder is our new Chief Financial Officer. He's been here 5 years and graduate of Calvin, former CFO for Agility Health and audit manager for Crow. So we're really glad to have their expertise and their knowledge with us. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the two of you.
Hey, great. Thanks, Michael, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. For those who don't know anything about Holland Home, I thought I'd just briefly go over a little bit about who we are. So we've got an org chart for Christian Living Services, which is actually the holding company for Holland Home. Holland Home's kind of on the left-hand side of this page. We've got our Breton campus, our Rayburg campus, and our foundation, Fulton, which we've had for many, many years, is currently being sold. So we're going to talk a lot about life care and how that's provided in those facilities. But the greater part of Christian Living Services, we also own Faith Hospice, probably the largest hospice provider here in West Michigan, Reliance Community Care Partners, which provides Medicaid waiver services, among a few other things, and Trillium Institute. So those are wholly owned and sister organizations to Holland Home. And then in the blue boxes here, we're partners, collaborative partners with Care Resources, a PACE program, all-inclusive care for the elderly, Tandem 365. We're partners with that on a population health management program where we contract with Medicare Advantage programs, and then Atria Home Care, which has a Grand Rapids division, a Lakeshore division, and then a private duty agency called Help at Home. So a huge breadth of services connected with Holland Home. A little bit more about Holland Home. We're actually the 69th largest senior living community in the nation, nonprofit multi-site senior living community. We were founded way back in 1892, so we've been around for over 125 years. We're headquartered right here in Grand Rapids. We have a total of 3 communities today, our Breton campus, Rayburg campus, and Trillium Woods. 2 of those are life plan communities. We do have a debt rating with Fitch, BBB-, so the lowest end of investment grade ratings, and we've had that for a number of years. Really, out of the 4,000 senior living communities throughout the nation, there's only about 170 that even have a rating, and Holland Home is there. You can see the number of units we have broken down between independent living, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, and hospice units. Our Breton Woods campus has about 540 Residences, Raybrook has 636, and we've got 20 inpatient beds at Trillium. So almost 1,200 units that we have. Our facility-based services, we offer independent living, both at Raybrook and Breton, assisted living, both those campuses, along with memory care. We provide rehab, skilled nursing, and an inpatient hospice system at Trillium. And our community-based services are really provided in the greater community, really over about 13 different counties, as well as to residents of our facilities through Atrio Faith Hospice, Care Resources, and the Medicaid waiver program through Reliance. We're going to talk a little bit more today just about the way that continuing care contracts work. And these are actually regulated by a law called the Continuing Care Community Disclosure Act of 2014. Now, this act became effective in the first part of 2015. It replaced the prior act from Public Act 440 of 1976. And these acts are really put in place to empower the Michigan Corporation Securities Bureau to regulate these offerings of continuing care agreements. And they're there to really protect any fraudulent practices that may take place. And if they discover those, be able to impose penalties in place. So that's really what we're talking about. So there's a law that actually regulates these continuing care retirement communities. In Michigan, there are actually 32 registered communities. 29 of those are facility-based, and 3 of them are really continuing care at home programs. Some of these communities have been really providing life care programs long before the act was ever put in place. And of the roughly 11,000 residences that are out there, divided up between independent living, assisted living, and skilled nursing, Holland Home has nearly 11% of those under its span of control. Here's just a listing of the 29 facility-based communities that are out there. Holland Home was the first community that was registered in the state of Michigan. Back in 1977, we were registered. You can see Grand Rapids has a fair amount of CCRCs with Border Hills, Covenant, Maple Creek, which is the Samaritas program, Beacon Hill, and Clark. So a few facilities that are in the Grand Rapids area. So what happens? We actually apply and get our continuing care agreements registered each year. We produce a disclosure statement. The disclosure statement is much like you would see in a prospectus for a mutual fund. You go through it, it's got all the information related to the obligations of both the organization and a resident entering into it. The whole key with this is that if you're advising somebody about a life plan community or a continuing care community, they should get this agreement long before they ever enter into the agreement. And it really spells out all of their responsibilities related to the continuing care agreement. In this disclosure statement, there are really 4 key things that get laid out. One is that there is risk involved with this. You are entering into a long-term agreement. So there is some risk involved with that. Excuse me. The second piece is really why we're talking to this group today is you should really seek the advice of an attorney or financial advisor, independent of Holland Home or any community that's out there. Excuse me. The entrance fees that you pay for one of these agreements are really subordinate to any mortgages of the facility. And really, if it's in writing, that's what you should rely on. You shouldn't rely on any information that's provided by somebody that you're talking to. In our overview here today, we're going to talk about the continuing care agreement. We're going to talk about entrance fees. And we're going to talk about monthly fees. The continuing care agreement really comes down to two things. It provides you access to the nursing facility or assisted living facility on a priority basis. And it really provides, in case you run out of money, the ability to still continue to live there without the ability to pay and have your fees waived. So those are really the two things that the agreement provides. Excuse me. So why is access important? Access is enormously important for a couple of reasons. First of all, both of Holland Home's nursing facilities are 5-star quality facilities. Not every nursing home out there is a 5-star community. We look at hours per resident day. Hours per resident day for Holland Home facilities is right around 4.1. You can see the information on your screen. For other for-profit, non-profit facilities are really lower than the level of service that Holland Home offers. So if you had no agreement and you were living in the community and you needed nursing, you may not be able to get into one of the Holland Home facilities, where if you have a life care contract, a CCA agreement with us, we guarantee that you will have access to our facilities. And the key is they're exceptionally good facilities. If you notice on the second to the bottom line on the screen, we also talk about assisted living. The Holland Home assisted living facilities are staffing ratios at about 2.8 hours per resident day, which is comparable to most nursing homes across the country. So much higher level of care. Another reason why access to Holland Home is important, 75% of our nursing beds are private rooms. All of our assisted living facilities have private rooms. And within our memory care beds in assisted living, they're all private rooms. And we were really the first designated organization in Michigan to receive the TEPA Snow positive approach to care designation. And I think about 4th or 5th in the country that actually received that designation. All of our staff, from my position down to any position working in the facilities, receives training through the Dementia Journey training, which really allows you to really empathize with somebody dealing with memory care or dementia services. And that's something we provide to all of our staff programs. So again, excellent provision of care, private rooms, and excellent staff trained. A couple other reasons to think about access to Holland Home. Here's just some statistics about the world we live in today. When you look at the population, today there are about 13, or in 2020, there are about 13 million seniors over the age of 80. When we look at 2040, that number grows to 28 million. So about 113% growth over a 20-year period. And then the age group that's from age 65 to 79, we go from 43 million to 53 million there. So another 10 million in growth. That's a key thing to remember as you're advising seniors and you think about the number of people coming into the area of needing services, senior services. There's substantial growth going on over the next 20 years. And so just understand that, because the reverse side of this is really the next page, and that's who's going to provide care for all of these seniors. So there's a ratio that we look at, which is called the caregiver support ratio. And it's really the ratio of people who are age 45 to 64, kind of caregivers, and comparing that to those who are over 80 plus. Today, there's about 6.3 people for every person over age 80. As we move into the next 20 years, by 2040, that number will be cut in half. So if you think about you know, maybe never moving into senior living and then needing care, your ability to access care through a private duty agency or some other mechanism may be far less likely to be able to get that in future years than if you're living in a senior living community who's committing to providing those services. So just understand, more people than ever are getting to that age where they are looking at senior living, and fewer and fewer people are going to be there to be able to provide those services. I'm going to turn it over to Adam now, who's going to kind of go through some of the entrance fee information.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so in light of what Dave was just discussing, I mean, really, Holland Home takes this mindset of trying to design ways in which to deliver our services to as many people as possible, and vary that based on, you know, kind of ability to pay as much as is possible. So really, our mindset is really geared towards affordability as much as we can make that happen. And so in light of that, we have 3 typical entrance fee plans when it comes to the independent living units. As people are looking to enter into a continuing care agreement, they typically pick one of 3 plans. We have the first plan at $35.65, which each plan varies the components, and each one has a different entrance fee cost associated with it. So the first one, as I was saying, is the $35.65. Plan 2 is a 50/50, and a plan 3 is a 75/25. Well, what does that mean? So in saying those percentages, we're really referring to what percentage is ultimately non-refundable versus refundable. And Dave will talk later about, you know, kind of the specifics around the non-refundable and the refundable piece. But really, the way to think about this is the non-refundable piece is effectively your cost. The refundable component is something you'll get back once you vacate the unit. The non-refundable piece you should think of at the time the resident were to enter into the CCA. That's effectively what they're saying they're willing to put down. In addition to the obvious thing is the entrance fee is greater than the non-refundable, but the non-refundable is effectively the cost at the end of the day. So to kind of walk through examples here, two just kind of random examples. One unit of Bayberry at the Breton Terrace, which is a 1-bedroom, 960 square feet or so. You can see the 3 different entrance fee plans and how they play. So the 75/25 for that same unit is about $154,000, and the non-refundable piece would be $115,000, or effectively the resident's cost, and the refundable would be about $38,000. Well, that same unit, if you're to do a 50/50 plan, the entrance fee in total is $181,000, and you'd split. So $90,500 is non-refundable. $90,500 would go back to the resident upon vacating the independent living unit. And the 35/65, you put down the most up front, but you also get the most back. So just over $200,000 total entrance fee. The non-refundable piece just over $70,000, but ultimately upon vacate, the resident would get about $131,000 back. So that's all to say there's a lot of potential variables in this, and this is one of the reasons why we're having this discussion today is to continue to encourage folks to engage their advisors as to what makes the most sense for them, both financially and practically, as they're looking at opportunities out in the marketplace and what a continuing care agreement at Holland Home might look like, what types of units they're looking at, what just makes the most sense financially. So if you go to the next one. So Breton Homes North is kind of our one exception to this right now. And really the primary exception is we have the 35/65 plan, the 50/50, but instead of the 75/25, we have a 15/85. We couldn't get the economics to work right on a 75/25. So instead of it's a 85/15. Breton Homes North is our newest development. It's a little bit, I'll call it a little bit more higher end. The finishes are exceptional. The space is a little bit bigger in each of those unit types. And so just because of how those units themselves are structured, we don't have the 75/25, but it's the 85/15. It works comparable to how any of the other plans would work. So we can go on to the next one. Really what we want to highlight here, and this is really key. This goes back to kind of what I started with, which is our goal is to always get to yes for somebody. So if they're interested in coming to Holland Home, can we get to a yes? Can we get them in a unit that works for them, that they're happy with, but also seems to fit their financial profile? So with that, we have entrance fees as low as $75,000 on the Raybrook campus to as high as $360,000 on the Raybrook campus. And on the Breton campus, we have entrance fees as low as $120,000 and as high as $760,000. And one thing I wanted to add to this is that as I looked across, so we have about 10% of our total inventory you can get into with an entrance fee of $125,000 or below. And then if you went up to $175,000 or below, that's about a third of our total available inventory that we have kind of in our whole portfolio is at the entrance fee level or below. And that's really intentional on our part to, again, reinforce. We're trying to make it so as many people as possible can access the services that Holland Home offers and live in our communities. With that, though, we do require a financial disclosure. And really the intention behind the financial disclosure is to kind of help provide a guide for a resident or prospective resident as to, okay, this is kind of where you're at from an asset and income perspective. What unit type might make the most sense for you, and to kind of help walk with them along this. Again, we're always trying to get to yes. You know, if somebody came in with very little in assets and very little in income and said, we want the 8515 Breton Homes North plan, and they barely have enough to make the entrance fee, we might steer them someplace else within our portfolio and say, well, that one probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you. How about a couple of these others that might meet your living style requirements, but also at the same time ensure that you have ample financial resources once you've paid the entrance fee. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's really the impetus behind asking for the financial disclosures, really just helping to guide folks. So there's a couple other nuanced things with our entrance fees that are kind of add-ons that residents can look to do when they come into our facilities in the independent living side. You can add a garage or a carport if you live in one of the apartment style buildings, which is the Terrace or the Ridge on the Breton campus, or Estates 1 or 2 on the Raybrook campus. So you can add that, and you can remove it at any point in time. If you add it when you come in, and 5 years later you discover you have this deep-seated love of public transportation that you hadn't unlocked before, and you want to get rid of your car, well, then feel free to get rid of your garage or carport at that point in time too. So our Breton Homes and Raybrook Homes, there are little add-ons there. So those are kind of our non-congregate buildings. Those are townhome style or single family style units. Those oftentimes have porches that can either be modified to be 3-season porches if they haven't been already. There's all kinds of things that may add to the entrance fee or may result in adjustments to the entrance fee. And there's also enhancements a new resident could put in as they move in, which is a fantastic benefit there. So we'll go to the next one. The thing really to note here is you can add a second person. So we have a couple options. So as couples are looking to move in, these are generally our options for that second person fee. So you have one of two options. So you can either pay $30,000 up front, which would all be non-refundable, which would get amortized over 67 months, which I think Dave has a section where he'll talk about the amortization of the non-refundable a little bit. Or you can pay $350 per month for as long as there's a second person living in the independent living unit. So really, this is one of those conversations that couples need to have as they're looking to come in, which is maybe one individual's in really fantastic health, one is in poorer health, and it may make more sense for them to go $350 per month because the other one may need to move to a higher level of care a little bit sooner. So it's having kind of that real conversation. There may be some couples who are a little bit more asset rich versus income rich. So maybe the $30,000 up front makes the most sense to them. Might have some couples who are more income rich versus asset rich. Maybe the $350 per month makes more sense to them. So there's just a conversation that needs to be had among the couple, but among their advisors and us as well to see, okay, what may make the most sense for you. So again, it's trying to create a structure that enables as many people as possible to afford the care, and the facilities we provide. That's really what this is ultimately geared towards. And I think this turns it over to Dave.
All right, thanks, Adam. So a couple things, the non-refundable amount, that amount is amortized from a refundability perspective at about 1.5% a month. So after about 67 months, it's fully used up. So if somebody moved in and they left after 10 months, roughly 15% of that is used, and the other 85% is refunded, even though it's called a non-refundable amount. The other piece to understand about the non-refundable amount is the government actually looks at that as a prepayment of future care. And actually a percentage of that non-refundable amount may be deductible as a medical expense in the year that it was paid. This isn't the case for all life plan communities, so you certainly want to find out if somebody's considering something outside of Holland Home, whether that's the case for that facility. But in Holland Home's case, we've dug into this a bit further, and because we actually amortize into our income that non-refundable over the life of the person, we've concluded that there is a medical deduction here, and it roughly runs about 50% of the non-refundable. So if you had a $200,000 entrance fee under a 50-50 plan, 50% is non-refundable. Roughly 50% of that could be deductible as a medical expense in the year that you come in. So obviously that could be an advantage when you look at the different plans and you look at the amount of the non-refundable under the different plans, and they may be higher or lower. And will that benefit the person? Do they have income that could be offset? Do they have, in the year that they come in, knowing that there might be this deduction, are there other medical expenses that they normally don't qualify? Dentures, hearing aids, some of those big ticket items that don't get spent every year. Is that the year to kind of do that medical expense because you're going to be over the deductible for the itemized deduction? So just kind of keep that in mind as it relates to this non-refundable amount. Compare the contracts between life plan communities. Not everybody does it exactly consistent. So Holland Home takes that non-refundable amount and they amortize it at 1.5%. There are some life plan communities who will take the entire entrance fee and multiply that times 1.5% and then apply it up to the non-refundable amount. So in those cases, they're actually going through that amount twice as fast. So Adam referred to that non-refundable amount as ultimately being a cost. You don't want that cost to be used up twice as fast if you don't have to. So certainly take a look at those contracts, read the agreements to see what they say. Holland Homes, we take the non-refundable and multiply times 1.5%. And that's a law number. That number is dictated to us by the Continuing Care Disclosure Act. That's not a number we come up with, the 1.5%. But others will maybe take it against the total entrance fee versus just the non-refundable amount. And as far as the refundable portion, when does that become refundable? Well, first of all, the resident needs to vacate the unit somewhere down the road. Could be when they move into a higher level of care, or the agreement gets terminated for one reason or another, or the person passes away and eventually that unit gets vacated. Our current agreements today say that we have to, after the point the unit's been vacated, return that refundable amount within 9 months of that vacation. There's an exception for Brenton Homes North. That's actually 18 months. If we resell those units prior to those dates, then that refund is paid out at the sooner of that, but either 275 or 550 days. That refundable amount is reduced by a sales fee of 6%. In state of Michigan says you can go up to 8% of those. So read the different contracts that are out there. And then refurbishment costs. And so this comes right out of the rules too. The refurbished cost is equal to the actual refurbishment costs, or 4% of the entrance fee, whichever is higher. Again, read through the contracts when you're comparing to other places. The new act from 2014 allowed life plan communities to write into our agreements that the refundable amount wouldn't be due until the resale date. Now ours are 9 months and 18 months, but there are communities out there that it's based on resale. So depending on what the real estate market looks like in certain cases, I go back to looking at maybe 2009, 2010. There were a lot of times where it took us a while to turn those units over, and you talked about years. So again, read through those agreements. We're going to turn it back to Adam to talk about a few other things.
Yeah, so a few additional elements that are kind of key to the continuing care agreement: right of occupancy, marriage, ownership, access to other Holland Home facilities, and kind of options for payment of the refundable. So we'll kind of walk through each one of these at a high level. So right of occupancy, right? So the continuing care agreement limits who can live in the unit to who's on the continuing care agreement for the most part. So they have to be named in the agreement, have to be essentially a member of the community, which enables them to access all the benefits and amenities of living in that community.
Then with marriage, a lot of times we'll have couples come in, and one of the couples may pass away. And it seems like once or twice a year we get some residents that get married or get remarried. And so you can add a person to your agreement. The person coming in has to be at least 55 years of age. They can be added to the agreement. You can only do that once. We've had some residents try to do that a number of times where they keep losing their spouse, but you can't really perpetuate the agreement by keep adding a spouse. So you can do that for a second time. The key really for marriages, whether you're adding a spouse or whether this is the first time a couple is moving in, is that both members of the couple are responsible for all of the obligations of the agreement as it relates to both members of the couple. Generally, when you're dealing with a couple that's been married once, that's not a big issue. But if you have second marriages, which we do run into, and there may be a prenup agreement, really Holland Home is not a party to those prenuptial agreements. And so when both members sign on to a continuing care agreement, and there's expenses related to both or either of the residents later on, that when they move into higher levels of care, all of the assets of both of the couple members of the couple are responsible for all of those agreements. So I think that's key, just understanding for potential clients that you may have and you're advising on this, is that if there's a prenup in place, this agreement may be inconsistent with what they've directed through the prenuptial agreement.
So ownership, upon execution of a CCA, there's no change in ownership of the actual underlying real estate. That real estate is maintained in ownership by Holland Home. Really, the CCA is granting you access, the ability to live in that space, and then access to future care should you ever need it, as well as the real critical thing as well, our life care promise, right? Should you ever run out of resources in order to pay for care through no fault of your own, we'll continue to provide everything you need from an overall care perspective within our facilities at a reduced cost to you. The other thing, access to licensed facilities of Holland Home, right? So every once in a while, we'll do kind of assessments. And so some of these may be requested by family. Some of these may be kind of based on observation, or maybe requested by a spouse to say, hey, my husband is really struggling in these areas. Can you go in and do kind of a level of care assessment? And using a very objective tool, we'll go in, do an assessment, and it'll provide some feedback as to say, actually, you know what? He or she is really struggling with a whole variety of activities of daily living. They may need to move into a higher level of care. So what that tool allows us to do is then facilitate a conversation with the family, and other loved ones to have a real conversation about, okay, mom and dad, they're progressing, they're aging, and as a result, they're in need of some additional services. The CCA provides a very clear and simple roadmap in order to moving into a higher level of care within Holland Home. And so as a result of those assessments, the resident may move from independent living into one of our assisted living facilities. And that's a very seamless transition as much as we can make it so. With that move, though, there's no required additional entrance fee, anything like that. There's no kind of additional downstroke in order to move from one level of care to the next, as far as kind of a financial entrance fee between those. Once you're in, you're kind of in from that vantage point. So it gives you access to all of our assisted living, memory care services, and skilled nursing services. So that's really key and critical. When it comes time to issue the refund of the refundable component, as Dave was indicating, really there's two things that happen. Either the resident's still alive and we'll issue the refund directly to them, or we'll issue the refund out to their estate. And in essentially virtually every case, we ask the resident at the time they sign their CCA to also sign an addendum, which provides an assignment of the refundable to a living trust of theirs. In which case, if they've passed away, we issue the check or the payment back to the estate, it go into the trust, and then the trust takes over from there. So really, it's those two payment provisions there.
Financial assistance, one of the key elements was access, and the other one is if you run out of resources, what happens? Well, we have a policy that residents pay for their fees for as long as they possibly can. But guess what? It's expensive when you get into assisted living and nursing. And if a member or a resident exhausts all of their resources and their ability to get support, through Medicare, Medicaid, other options, then what we'll do is we'll basically ask them to file another disclosure statement. We'll verify where they're at, and we'll evaluate each person based on what's going on in their particular situation. So they fill out this new disclosure agreement, and if we determine that, you don't have the capacity to pay for those services, we come up with an amount that you can pay based on the income that you have. To the extent that we do provide assistance, we've got a claim. We do make a claim against the member's estate if there's assets that are tied up, and we do have a right of offset against the refundable portion of the entrance fee if that had not yet been paid back to the resident. Part of the agreement, part of the continuing care agreement, is the resident, the member, agrees not to divest him or herself of assets that may become necessary for them to pay Holland Home. So we're not really out after people who are tithing, especially in West Michigan where tithing is so strong. And so, we kind of use a $5,000 limit for that in our new agreements. If you're making $50,000 a year and tithing $5,000 a year, that's perfectly fine. However, we are looking for other types of divestment. One is irrevocable trusts. Those seem to be kind of popular for certain advisors out there. And for us, an irrevocable trust basically means you had assets that were available to pay for care, and you move them out of your control, and now they're not available for care. And that was not because of no fault of their own. It was intentional that they did that. And so we would look at that as being divestment. It would prevent them from getting support from Holland Home in that case. And so that's kind of how we look at the financial assistance for folks moving in. It's interesting, we do have about 15% of our residents at any given time that are on assistance. We feel it's an important part of the mission that we provide, and the level of that care ranges in the $4 to $5 million each year for financial assistance.
So when we talk about kind of monthly fees, for independent living after the entrance fee. So our monthly fees, again, this is all geared towards trying to keep it as affordable as possible. So our monthly fees just over $700 a month for both Breton and Raybrook. And that's, and outside of those, we really take an a la carte approach. And so this is, again, I don't think we can underscore enough. This is where you have to read the fine print of the CCAs and understand what's in and what's out of the monthly fees. So when you look to compare fees across facilities, you might have some facilities that are $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, even after the entrance fee. Well, that you may be getting kind of a big meal plan. Maybe you don't want a meal plan, but you may be stuck kind of paying for that plan. We've taken the approach that if you don't want it, we're going to try and keep it as low cost as possible. We'll have a la carte. So we have dining services. You can go to the cafe, get something. Same thing, housekeeping, a la carte. If you want housekeeping, great. You can pay separately for that if that's what you desire. But if you don't want it, then we're not going to force you to pay for it. So that's really been our approach here. And so again, as you're looking to advise your clients, it's understanding that there's little things to pay attention to, and one of those is what is or is not included in the monthly fee, and it's not always an apples to apples comparison. So the utilities are typically billed directly to the resident. It's not really a Holland Home thing. They arrange it with the utility company. So it's basically whatever they use, that's what they're paying for. Again, same thing, kind of along the a la carte thing. So we really make it direct. So what is it they're really going to consume? And that's really what they're going to pay for, and try and limit it to that as much as possible. So here, again, as Dave was noting, assisted living, skilled nursing really gets expensive, and we do everything we can to keep our costs down. But to a large extent, as Dave noted too, we're talking about caregiver shortage, that all puts pressures on our ability to recruit and continue to pay affordable living wages to our direct care workers too. And that all correlates to how do we make sure that our revenues offset our expenses, kind of thing. And so the thing to note here is when you're looking at assisted living, this is typically where, if your client has a long-term care insurance policy, this is where it may start to kick in and may start to help offset some of these costs here. So assisted living ranges anywhere from $82 a day to $280 a day. So you're talking $2,500 to almost $8,500 a month, depending on, again, the level of care that's required. And it all varies based on what level of care is required for that particular resident. Skilled nursing, actually, we're still on Breton. So Breton, there's a slightly higher fee. They're covering a little bit in property taxes on that campus, but still a pretty comparable structure to how Raybrook works. So we maintain a pretty comparable kind of fee and level of care structure across all of our campuses. Again, that's to try and keep it as simple as possible for folks. For skilled nursing, the one thing to note here is that folks who are in skilled nursing and are under a Holland Home CCA, they pay $20 per day less than somebody who may be coming from outside of the community. Maybe it was an outside community admission just into skilled nursing. They're paying $20 a day more than a Holland Home resident would be paying. And again, skilled nursing services, we're not alone in this. We look at our fees, we try and price them lower than our peers as much as possible, but they're relatively comparable to what you'd find in the marketplace. Again, there you can almost draw a direct line between direct care worker cost and cost of care, and that's really our clear linkage here. So I think with that, I think we'll have questions, Michael, if there are any.
Yeah. So Adam, David, thank you so much. It is a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. There are a lot of information, and I think some good background information and some really good just educational that, hey, as you're looking at these things, consider some of these differences. So if anyone that's on the call has any questions, if you could just type that in the question and answer portion. Like I mentioned earlier, if you do want a copy of this presentation, you can email me at michael.loufman, Loughman, at hollandhome.org. You can contact me through our website. I think my email address was in the Zoom invite. So I am not seeing any questions. So that means everybody understands it, or they don't know what to ask. So or maybe a little bit of both. So we do have a question here in the chat. With the payment splits, how much monthly is it really per month?
So in independent living, it's so the entrance fee has no bearing on what your monthly fee is. So that's actually a very good question. There are a lot of life plan communities that, depending on the entrance fee plan that you choose, it has an impact on your monthly fee. In the Holland Home system, it really doesn't. So if you're moving into independent living, regardless of what your entrance fee is, your monthly fee is going to be in that $700, low $700 range, really, plus your utilities and taxes amounts that go with it. If you move into those higher levels of care, then you pay those monthly, those daily rates for the different levels of assisted living, which are really based on that level of care assessment tool that Adam referred to. So hopefully that answered your question.
Good. All right. Thank you for that question, Tyler. Anyone else? Well, if not, the question here is, the entrance fee is more of a down payment then? That's a question.
Yep, it's exactly what it's called. It's an entrance fee. It's paid at the time that you enter into the agreement, and it's broken down between those two categories, the non-refundable and refundable amount. And so the non-refundable, again, is used up over the time that resident spends with Holland Home, is really refundable over the first 67 months. The refundable is paid back to you at the time that it's vacated. So, and then I see a follow-up question from Victoria. If you don't own the apartment or a condo, why do you pay property tax? It's because property taxes are assessed to Holland Home, and in our agreements, we have passed those costs on directly, and we prorate the property taxes based on the level of entrance fees to all of the entrance fees. So there's a pro rata amount that we do that. Some life plan communities will take property taxes and just embed them into the monthly rates. And that's what causes the monthly rates to be variable, because you're looking at smaller entrance fees versus larger entrance fees.
So another follow-up question, do you view this as more beneficial than paying a monthly payment with no entrance fee? Are more care facilities switching to this method? So more of a rental versus entrance fee model?
Excellent question. Actually, this is the best question we've had so far. A rental is a rental. You pay, and when you can no longer pay, they kick you out. There's no promise of future care. So I think in the Holland Home system, that entrance fee and entering into the continuing care agreement gives you two things: access, and we went through all of those pieces of information. You have access to the most diverse, best senior living community in West Michigan. And if somewhere down the road you run out of money, we're going to continue providing care and services to you for as long as you're with us. So you're absolutely right. Rental is an option. You can enter into a rental agreement. There may or may not be services that are provided along with that. And if you run out of money or need access to higher levels of care, there's no guarantee that you have a space to be, but that's the option that you're looking at.
Right. Great questions. I don't see any more. If they do come up, you can reach us through our website, and we can answer any of those questions if you contact us through the Contact Us part of our hollandhome.org website or the email address I mentioned earlier. We'd be delighted to answer any questions. We just got a note. Thank you so much. Very informative. So we're good. We're glad you found it to be so. We're here as a resource. So I'm I know Adam and David are both happy to talk to anybody at any time about the contracts, about Holland Home, about things to weigh out. They're a resource, and I think the biggest things I think for financial planners, estate planning attorneys like yourselves, our very second paragraph in the disclosure encourages people to get outside counsel from persons like you. So we want them to get an objective third-party perspective, and that's why we do some of these things to kind of educate. So again, thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this great May day, and we'll see you again. Take care, everyone.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.